for getting this series together and coming up with the idea of the show. We've got a great cameraman tonight, and my compatriot on the board of the Bynum Front Porch, the nonprofit, is Chuck is here filming back home in Siler City, and from a safe distance all the way in Siler City. Our intern is answering all the questions that are coming across on the Facebook feed. Chuck, how many people have we had online tonight?
A lot.
A lot, okay.
That's a great answer.
And also I'd like to thank Galin is here from the Chatham Journal, and if you'd like to subscribe to his email newsletter, please follow the comments on this, because Amy, and watch our Facebook page, because we're going to be posting all of those Facebook pages and links to all the artists, and my pages and Jean's pages and Eric's pages, Jack's pages, and probably Chuck's pages, and Amy's pages. Anyway, we're going to post all that on Facebook in the next few minutes and the next few hours. So check in on that. So now I'm going to do your bedtime story. That was much quicker than last week, right? So, and the story I'm going to tell tonight is actually sort of got an Easter tie-in. My mom, I come from a family of 7, and it's 6 girls and 1 boy. And I was the middle child. I've got an older sister, Lana, my brother, Chan. Then there was me, and the only boy. And I've got scars to prove it. And then I had 4 younger sisters, Amy, Tammy, Mary, Lydia. And we never said one of their names without saying all of them. Amy, Tammy, Mary, Lydia. And my mom used to make all of our clothes. She'd make the little dinner jackets for my brother, his bow ties. She would make all of our our school clothes, our dresses that we wore to church or out shopping, just a regular, good, casual clothes. But when it came to like Easter and Christmas, my mom, it was over the top. There was yards and yards and yards of lace and satin and organdy and ruffles and crinoline petticoats, the little fluffy petticoats that stick out to here. And my mom would make all 7 of us and herself a dress for Christmas, and my brother a suit. And then the minute that Christmas was over, like the 2nd of January, she would start working on our Easter outfits. And we'd go down to Greenville, South Carolina, and get some, fabric from the outlets down there near all the cotton mills. And the more elaborate and fancy and shiny and slippery and sticky and picky and itchy the fabric was, the more likely it was going to be put into one of our Easter dresses. And my mom, she worked and worked and worked and gathered and worked, stayed up late at night and designed them and put them. My aunts used to say, one of them, my Aunt Bet, she said, you know what? I used to get to church early just so I could see you and your little sisters prance in. We didn't walk anywhere in those little, we were like little fluffy macaroons. We didn't walk anywhere, we pranced. And when you walked, the little skirt under the crinoline petticoat, it bounced with you. And we had little black or white Mary Jane shoes, and they had little white anklet socks with lace on them, and those shoes would eat those socks, and your heels would get exposed, and you never made it through Easter without having at least one good old size blister on the back of your heel with them little shoes that tore your heels up. But we had the little hats that matched, and the little purses, and the little gloves, and they had like silk flowers on them. And and me and my sisters, we're all tomboys. We like to camp, we like to fish, we like to bake and bread and whatever. But we were raised on a farm. We used to work horses. We used to go out at 6 o'clock in the morning and help my dad milk cows. Our jobs in the summer was to like hoe the garden and 3 acres worth of vegetables. And that was their job every single day. We hoed and when it got too hot, we'd go to the creek and go swimming or go fishing. And then in the evening, we'd go play baseball, and then we'd go pick whatever we were going to eat for supper, or whatever my mom needed to can that night. But anyway, we were all tomboys. So my mom, before Sunday, every single Sunday, Saturday night, she would scrub us. I mean, scrub us down hard in the bathtub with scalding hot water and lots and lots and lots of ivory and dial soap. And then we'd go to bed, and then we'd get up the next morning. She'd put us right back in the bathtub and scrub us again. And then she would work and dry our hair, and she would curl it. And as each one of us got ready, we were commanded to go sit on the couch with our little Bible and with our little white gloves on and our little purse and our little hat and our little ruffly socks and our shoes that were going to make a blister on the back of our heel. And we were not allowed to move. Absolutely were not allowed to move. If my dad saw a scuff on one of our shoes, he would take it off and take it out to the laundry room and put a little bit of Vaseline on it and buff it up and spit shine it and bring it back and put it on us. We couldn't even stand up to take that shoe off. Well, by the time all 7 of us got ready and we go loading into the big old Pontiac, we had a Pontiac sedan, and it was distinctive for 2 reasons. It was like a 1958 Pontiac, and the back seat was as big as a couch and had mohair upholstery. And if you sat down in one of them little dresses, with the petticoat, that means the back of your legs was bare. And them mohair seats would be poking you with them mohairs. And the other thing was it had automatic transmission. It was called Dynaglide transmission. And it had D. My dad he'd go, all right, we've been in P for park. I'm getting ready to put it into D for drag. But that car, it rode smooth. I mean, it was like a land ship, all the curve, it was all rounded. But the other thing of distinction besides the automatic transmission was it was mint green. It was one of the first cars ever that wasn't black. And it had a naked Indian princess. It was a Pontiac. It had a naked Indian princess as a hood ornament, and I ain't yet to figure out how that got by the 1958 censors, but it did. So, but anyway, my brother would sit in the middle of the front seat. My mom would be in the passenger side holding a baby, because we didn't have car seats back then. This is back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. Anyway, my mom would be sitting in the front seat holding the baby, and my dad would be driving in D for drag. And me and my 4 younger sisters and my older sister Lana, we would all be piled into the back seat of that horsehair couch, mohair couch, whatever seat back there. And it would just be like the back end of the car would just be level full all the way up to the windows with all them ruffles and petticoats. You'd see our little heads sticking up out of the top of all the froth around us. And we would go to church, and we lined up, and as my Aunt Bit said, we pranced in, and we sat down in the row on the pew, and we could not swing our feet. We could not take our little gloves off, even though it was really hard to turn the pages of the Bible or turn the pages of the hymnal with them little. We had to sit there and be nice, proper young ladies. And we stayed there through the sermon, through the choir singing, through the offertory. And the very second the head deacon said amen and church was over, we were slap dabs, lickety-split, as fast as we could go out there on that porch. And oh my gosh, it's like the gloves would be coming off and going in our little purse. The hat would be coming off and going in our little purse. Then we couldn't take them shoes off, but we'd at least get unbound a little bit. And about that time, my Uncle Perry would come racing out of church, and the first thing he'd do, he'd swoop in like a hawk, and he would grab one of us up, and all my sisters and me and we're all really, 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 I shouldn't tell you guys this, we're all really, really, really ticklish. If you start doing like this from across, I can't even do that myself. If I start doing this from across the room, my sisters just go into conniption fits because we can't even stand to think about being tickled. And my Uncle Perry would swoop in like a hawk and pick us up by the waist, and he'd be tickling us by the rib cage all the way across the churchyard, and he would flip us upside down and drop us into these giant boxwoods out in front of East Fork Baptist Church. East Fork Baptist Church is on the East Fork of the French Broad River in the shadow of Sassafras Mountain, which is like right near the South Carolina, the mountainous part of South Carolina. But it's just over the border in North Carolina. That's where my family's lived since 1790 or so. So these boxwoods, East Fork was the second church built in Transylvania County. So these boxwoods have been there for like almost 300 years. They're huge. They're ginormous. And we'd be upside down with this little frothy, frilly crinoline and petticoat dress with the sash, with the satin sash and the little overlay jacket made out of lace and the organdy skirt. And we would be upside down with their little black patent leather shoes sticking up out of the tree and waving in the air. It's really hard to get out of a 300-year-old boxwoods if you're upside down wearing a crinoline petticoat. It's really, 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 really hard. You'd have to squeeze this way and squeeze that way, wiggle over here and get past that branch right there. And finally we'd get down to the point where we're to the ground. And then our legs and so forth would still be sticking up in the air or sticking up in the tree. And so you'd have to work your feet loose and get twisted, and you'd end up with your head on the ground smashed against the dirt, and you'd be getting dirt in your ears and sticks in your eyes, and your hair. Mama had worked for hours on the hair that she had curled and burned us with the curling iron over, and there was like 3 gallons of Aquanet hairspray in that hairdo. And we'd be just plastered on the ground and smeared with grass stains. And finally, we'd wiggle out from underneath that boxwood. And Uncle Perry, he'd be grabbing this little girl or this little boy over there and turning them upside down and putting them in a boxwood and them in an azalea and them in a holly bush. And he'd grab another one and turn them up and put them into a juniper bush. Uncle Perry would chase them youngins all over the yard at East Fork Church and turn every single one of us upside down and dump us into a shrub. Well, we'd work our way out finally and get out there, and the sashes would be untied and we'd be dirty and grass stains on our little dresses and, like I said, sticks in our hair and leaves and and we'd get just barely halfway catch our breath. And here'd come Uncle Perry again, and he'd swoop in and pick us up another time and turn us upside down and dump us into another tree or something. And this time he'd usually take our little black patent leather shoes off and go put them up on top of a pickup truck or put them up in a tree. And we'd have to pay my brother a quarter, like a good part, half of our allowance every week just to go get our little shoes out of the tree. By the time it was all over with, we'd just be a mess. Just a mess. And we'd come across the churchyard in our sock feet and crying and picking the leaves out of our hair. And my dad would be standing there beside the Pontiac, and he'd open the back door and he'd stuff one of us in, stuff another one in, pick up the sash that was on the ground, stuff that in, stuff the third one in. My mom, she'd be sitting in the front seat with that baby, and my brother beside her. My brother was real wise. He knew not to say nothing. She'd be mad as a hornet going, that Perry. I worked for hours to get these girls clean and get them dressed up, get their hair fixed. That Perry. We spent $17 on little pocketbooks and gloves down at Belk's yesterday. That Perry. Look at them socks. Them socks themselves are 75 cents a piece. That Perry. I swan. Every single week, every single Sunday. That Perry. There'd just be steam blowing out of her ears of fuming. My dad'd get all of us stuffed into the back seat with the sticks. And then the other one would be going, we'd all have to be comparing our owies, And my dad, he'd get in the old Pontiac and he'd crank her up and he goes, all right, it's time to put her into D for drag. he'd take off from East Fork Church, heading back towards our house. And East Fork Road, it winds back and forth along the creek and switches back. It's real narrow. It's one lane. You go over the bridge about 12 times. You pass falls, past places, cliffs and gorges where there's water oozing out of the rocks. And the whole time, my mom would be in that passenger seat with that baby, with that bottle going, that Perry, that Perry, that Perry. We'd be trying to get ourselves put back together in the back seat. My dad, he'd drive along with Landship Pontiac. It's smooth as silk going down that little country road like it was, on an interstate highway, just as smooth as silk. And we'd come around through Powelltown. And Powelltown's about 4 miles away. Our house is about 5 miles away from the church. So we'd be almost within sight of our house. Our farmhouse was set up on top of a hill above the bottomland. And Powelltown is the last little wide spot before you go around the curve and see our farm. And we'd come over the hill in Powelltown, and my dad would pull that Pontiac down into second gear so he wouldn't have to use the brakes so much. He didn't want to wear out the brakes on his good Pontiac. And we'd get down to the foot of the hill at Powelltown. My mom, by this time, she had veemed as much as she needed to veem, and she was getting quiet. She'd only said, that Perry, like 3 times in the last minute. And finally, she'd say it one last time, and we'd come around the curve and see our farm, the white house sitting up on the hill, and the cows and the pasture all down below it. She'd sigh one time great big, and she'd say, that Perry. My dad, real quiet like, he'd reach over and he'd take her hand. He'd squeeze a little bit, and he'd go, it's all right, honey. You know what? I think it might actually be good for him. He'd knock that Pontiac out of second gear and put it back up into D for drag, and we'd wind our way on that last mile home. And the next Sunday, exactly the same thing would happen over and over and over and over. That's your bedtime story. I sure do love you. I'm going to turn it back over to Jack and to Eric. Thank you, guys.
Oh, Cindy.